First thing we'll tell people is like, drop your ego.
$5 billion IPO.
Screaming currently, right? Aurelian, MarTech, e-commerce, and omni-channel solutions. These are some, I guess, a new lexicon in the dictionary. What is MarTech? What is omni-channel solutions? So please explain to us.
So, Shirley, the MarTech is a really fancy word to describe marketing and technology combined together. What we've seen, over the last couple of years is that there is a strong emergence of, like software, like CRM, social CRM, ERPs, and basically, like companies, they need to get a little bit of a stronger return on investment on, like the different clients that they can have. So this fancy word of, MarTech, marketing technology combined together is basically, a lot of different data analysts working together with programmers in order to basically maximize the kind of return on investment that can be expected. So your second question was related to omni-channel. So the tech world has evolved quite a bit in the last couple of years as well, where basically all the systems, they have the opportunity to communicate through what we call APIs. So basically, now you can easily have a CRM talking with a social CRM, talking with the e-commerce platform, and then all the backend system can communicate together, and having, like one single front end or several front end systems that could be, website, an app, or a mini program when we're talking about China. And everything can be seamless for, like the user to have one single experience and for all those systems to be able to communicate together. So that's really what we call omni-channel. And this is where, like the companies are investing, a lot to understand, how the systems will communicate for the greater benefit of the final end user.
One other thing that is really fancy is in your background. I guess it's a slogan of IT consultants always deliver more than expected. You have about 3 regional offices, right, in Asia, headquartered in Shanghai, some 70 people. It's all about digital transformation. This is kind of becoming an old school term, digital transformation. Tell us a bit what's next when it comes to digital.
I mean, first of all, obviously, trying to bring the best return on investment to our clients, like this is really the idea of like everybody when we're onboarding people, or, like when we're going to talk with our clients, we always try to, like drive them, put them on the right rails that are going to deliver like the right return on investment. So yeah, I mean, digital transformation is actually, like maybe something a little bit old, like all across the world, but in China, interestingly, digital transformation and private traffic is something that is pretty new, something that has existed only in the last 2 or 3 years. A couple of reasons, like since the year 2000, basically, I would say the e-commerce has been dominated heavily by Alibaba with Tmall and JD. And it's been like 2 or 3 years where brands, they finally realized that they're really struggling to get the data ownership. And there's not a real platform. Baidu, like there's not a very strong trust with Baidu, the same trust that we can have in the West with Google. So a lot of, like those users, a lot of those shoppers, they were like constantly going through, Alibaba, through Tmall and Taobao and JD. But now, finally, companies have realized that they don't have any data ownership, or like they maybe have like 10, 15% maximum of those data, and they're trying to grow those areas. So digital transformation is just really at the beginning in China, although we get some crazy super app that are, connected with mobile payment that are, like 90% of the payment and so on. So I think like we are living in a world in China that is like moving at the speed of light right now. And it's really, like a strong passion to be here. And that brings us back to the previous question, what is next? Basically, the next is like the omnicanality. It's like integrating all the systems together for the final end user, or whether they're on WeChat, whether they're going to be on a website or an in-store experience, for them to have, similar experience and to be able to have the right data and the right products push themselves.
So what's the next super app, Aurélien? Do you see any app on the horizon already that could be the next one?
You know what? if we're talking about like a global app coming to China, that's not going to happen. Clearly, we see with what's happening with, you know, TikTok, Douyin, like with the, you know, like the pressure that exists. Talking about, for example, Salesforce, you know, like Salesforce, which is, you know, like a big, you know, like tech CRM company and doing e-commerce and so on, like similar way as Adobe. They have, you know, like they have a deal with Alibaba, and like supposedly they're supposed to arrive in China in July 2021. But with everything that happened, you know, like with the COVID, with the trade war, all the, you know, political tension, I don't think that this is something that will happen, and that's something that is going to be pushed back. And you see a Chinese growing ecosystem. So, for example, the same day, you know, Alibaba signed a deal with Salesforce, the same day they invested $50 million on like a local CRM company that is like could compete with like Salesforce CRM tomorrow. So I think that's, you know, this is somewhere, you know, interesting. So now, if we look globally, what could happen? We could see that potentially Facebook will try to copy as much as possible the WeChat ecosystem. The only main difference that you'll have is that in order to create a WeChat or Alipay ecosystem, you need to have a perfect alignment, you know, like between the political power and basically the company itself and the people, in order for you to be able to expose those data. And we see that, you know, like with all the scandals that have happened with Facebook and like the lack of privacy and protection of those data, I see that user will be very skeptical to do this in the US or in the Europe. So I think that, and especially right now with, you know, like the American government is talking about like maybe breaking up those superpowers. So I don't think that they will allow them to gain even more power and to become a super app like WeChat.
Yeah, and come on, Facebook arriving in China anytime soon, that is definitely not going to happen.
I don't think so. No.
Really?
It didn't happen like 10 years ago. It will not happen today.
Aurélien, it sounds all easy, but it's actually not that simple, right? From my own personal experience, the Chinese social media market is gigantic today. If I try to have something that can actually take off on Chinese social media, it is almost like a drop of water in the ocean. I feel it's so much harder than the Western counterparts, just simply because of the demographics. So, what messages actually take off in China?
Yeah, surely. I think that, you know, a lot of companies, especially, I mean, we've been talking with international companies trying to penetrate the Chinese market for the last 10 years. And a lot of them, you know, like, especially, you know, a couple of years ago, now it's less and less the case. You know, they believe that they arrive in China with a very strong product, that, you know, like they arrive, they're kings, they're queens. You know, like they have like an ego that will be big like this. And I think the first thing we'll tell people is like, drop your ego. You're coming to China, even if you have like a very strong celebrity backing you up, you know, like there's a lot of very strong celebrity or like companies that came with celebrity, invested millions of dollars, and then in the end, like they didn't have the proper return on investment. So coming to China, you need to be, you need to work in an agile way, and you really need to go one step at a time. I've seen, you know, like those Fortune 500 companies coming here, investing, you know, like hiring the best Tmall partner, hiring the best social media agency, and like 2 years later, like lost so much money because they didn't anticipate that the market will be so complex. So I think coming here, the message is like, go one step at a time, know where you're going to invest, and really like dropping your ego and trying to localize as much as you can your teams here, trying to give them as much freedom, liberty, use obviously the right, you know, tech infrastructure, but try to localize as much as you can the message that you can have. And I would say more and more, you know, like have the right, you know, like general manager, Chinese obviously will make a big impact. And like it's a very hard market. It's a very hard market to penetrate, and don't expect to have like all the key figures like the ones you can have with, you know, Google, with the search engine marketing. You'll get quite a bit of information with, you know, everything related to Tmall and the different categories that you can invest in, but it's going to be quite complex. It's going to be challenging, and you'll have to change the way you manage your teams. So that's why, you know, having a local management is clearly going to make the difference.
So Aurelien, you just earlier mentioned that within this whole digital marketing or digital transformation universe, it's incredibly complex. I mean, the whole supply chain is incredibly complex as well. So explain to us, what are the component parts within this digital transformation supply chain?
So the digital landscape in China, so as we were mentioning earlier, since basically 2000 and basically the invention of e-commerce, everything has been done on the marketplaces. And now, like, there is, like step by step, like a switch with, like the birth of WeChat, the mini program. So just like for like good information, like last year, only $120 billion were spent on WeChat mini programs. So, and it's not like people like sending each other money on WeChat. We're just talking about companies building a mini program and buyers spending on it $120 billion in basically, I'll say like year two, because 2017 was the birth, 2018 was really the beginning, and 2019 is like really the second completely year. And we've seen the growth of those mini program that is exponential. So what we could expect maybe for 2020 could be, like even double what happened in last year. So we get two types of ecosystems. So those ecosystems that are managed by the Tmall partner, that are basically, like the companies that are going to help you managing your Tmall shop or your JD shop. You're going to have the marketing agencies, and those marketing agencies are going to be the one, helping you creating your content. And you're going to have like more like the digital like transformation company, like our company, for instance, that are going to work outside of like the Alibaba ecosystem in order to help companies to build their own ecosystem and WeChat mini program and so on. And basically the goal for those brands is that since, like 15 or 20 years, they've been leveraging those marketplaces. They have built some tech components, which are like, for example, like ERP or order management system. And basically the goal is like to ensure that without disrupting too much, like the old kind of business, we have the chance to help them build those infrastructure and connecting them here in order to make sure we're not going to disrupt, everything related to the logistic, to the fulfillment, to all the quality parts. And as well, like ensuring that user, whether they buy here or here, is going to be the same. And then the last thing is, of course, like the retail parts. You want to make sure that you're going to interconnect everything in relation to your retail. And if you have distributors, that basically everything that you're building in terms of e-commerce and technology is going to follow up, all the strategy, and that you're not going to build any unnecessary competition between the e-commerce, the digital, and the rest of your platform. So you need to set up like a smart program to do that.
Here at Hey China, we also use WeChat mini programs and WeWork and so on. But do you think you've had some big, names and heavy hitters as clients as well at IT consultants like Porsche, Zara, Gap, and so on? Do you think that they should also use these mini programs, or do you think that they should, combine in one big platform for both markets?
The interesting thing is that, last year, all those companies, they were coming to us with a brief. Oh, I need to build a mini program. They had no idea. They had no idea why they needed a mini program for. And then we've seen, the level of maturity has gone up, like big time, where, like we see, like from one brief to another, the same, like level of intelligence where it comes to, okay, we might need to create engagement. Therefore, let's do some user-generated content where we're going to obviously leverage, Alibaba, our Tencent Cloud, artificial intelligence to monitor that the images that are going to be posted are going to be the right one. And then there can be some, like manual checks afterwards. So let's do some user-generated content to have more engagement. Let's use, a little bit more like social CRM marketing automation to ensure that we're going to bring a little bit of a deeper connection, because what, those companies have seen as well is like every time that they're pushing a post on WeChat, basically the numbers of people opening those posts is actually going down. So companies need to become more and more intelligent in order to captivate, like those specific users. And then for the mini program, what they see is that if you today in 2020, like especially during the COVID period, and like the companies that have performed the best have been the companies that have had, you know, like that ecosystem where the shopper could buy, you know, quite easily. You're talking about luxury. You know, like all those luxury brands, they were not necessarily on the marketplaces. Some of them are, but a lot of them were not. So what would work is to ensure basically that your sales associate in the store will like be connected through WeChat, or even better through WeChat Work, and then like leveraging the mini program experience, sending them the product for them to buy, and so on. So what we've seen is that the companies that are performing the best are the companies that are checking all the boxes in terms of, you know, digital transformation must have. And basically you need to have today everything from e-commerce to enough user generated content to like a good loyalty program. And you need to make, you know, like this experience interesting enough and connected enough with basically the WeChat API, where you can basically pull, for example, like your Fapiao detail. Those are like the Chinese invoice detail, or like your delivery address. So basically the way it looks like when you enter a mini program, for the people who are not used to it, basically you open some sort of like app within WeChat, light version of an app. You authenticate yourself quite easily. Then you add the products, like if you're on an app, and then you'll go to your checkout, and just within one click, you'll be able to pull like an information related to your invoice and related as well to your address. And then you just click, and then this will arrive at your doorstep. You will be able to follow where the package is at any given time if you have the proper integration. And so that's super easy to shop, you know, like much easier than going on any website in the West, is because you get like such great integration within the WeChat platform that if you do a great mini program, like you're going to have a great return on investment. So to answer your question, companies, yes, they need to have this. Yes, they need to have e-commerce. Yes, they need to have, you know, like enough animation, you know, like WeChat group, or sales associates, you know, like collaborating, you know, like in a proper way with, how do you say, the different clients, and understanding as well, they need to have, you know, like the client profile in order to push them the right product at the right moment. So all of this is best in class, must have, and most of the brands right now, they're really going in this direction.
At the beginning, we talked about MarTech, and you have an engineering background. In today's digital transformation world, do people still rely on human instincts?
So I would say since, you know, a lot of those brands, we're talking about like small samples, you know, like, except like if you're, for example, like a Uniqlo or Zara, that is going to do like really thousands and thousands of orders every single days. This is when like you start to dig into like the data, the algorithm. But even at this stage, you know, a lot of the things are, you know, like human driven. And basically, obviously, there's some great machines, but we are still at the very, very beginning stage when it comes to AI, and everything is still like pretty much obviously through lines of code and through, you know, like very more and more powerful software. But everything is like all the decisions are still like human made.
Well, I think that's a piece of good news, or maybe even not news. I
Sure.
don't know how to interpret it, but you're saying that we are just at the very beginning of a AI-driven digital world.
Exactly. So, I mean, right now, you know, like the interesting thing is that like we're starting to, you know, like to have specific software that can work more and more on like the predictability, on the segmentation, or but it's still like once again like the really, you know, like initial stage of all of this. You talk, for example, like one of the big words like were like the chatbots a couple of years ago, but the chatbot is still like something very simple, like it's a decision tree where like depending on like what the user is gonna answer, we're gonna bring in here and then here and this has like an amazing effect on conversion, obviously. And this is like as an amazing effect as like whenever like somebody is going to answer a question, basically we're going to be able to administrate a little tag, you know, to say that this person like made this decision, therefore we can segment them, you know, like in a more accurate way in like a specific database in order to understand what kind of product we can push them at each and every single time. So that's something that is really really interesting.
One of the biggest business news and financial news we are waiting for, Aurelia, is Ant Group's $35 billion IPO sometime probably during this month. How will this change the game for people and businesses outside of China when it comes to mobile payments and the whole app infrastructure globally?
I think it's very interesting. First of all, like the move to really separate, like those two entities with, Ant Financial on one side and then Alibaba on the other side, and not mixing the two businesses together. I think that was brilliant, even though like the shareholder structure is going to be obviously a little bit different in each of those groups. But I think that companies will, like globally government will start to realize, like the firepower of China in terms of fintech. Ant Financial has been extremely, like aggressive when it comes to, strategic acquisition, whether it's been in Europe or in Asia, Vietnam, India, Australia, like always, working very closely with, some of the top fintech companies, acquiring like those top fintech company. I mean, like Ant Financial has been like probably the #1 company to do M&A across the world in the fintech world. So I'm not surprised to see such, like a business valuation. And I think that, like a company like PayPal should ask themselves like the proper question, because if, like Ant Financial has the opportunity to deploy and move as aggressively as they've done in China, in Africa, for instance, and, for everybody in Africa to like whenever they don't have a bank account, for them to have the opportunity to still open, like an account on Ant Financial, then it's going to cement really their position in so many of those countries where, like those, like big, American companies are going to be late to the party.
How does European companies stack up to the rest of the world in this whole Chinese digital marketing move?
So it's very interesting question. I mean, like today, like there's not, a lot of like big European companies when it comes to, like challenging the big Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and so on. So, it's kind of like two people party in a way, where,
What about in China? As far as European businesses who are screaming currently, right, ahead of the bilateral investment agreement, European companies are saying, well, we want to come into China, we want an equal open market access, etc., etc. How are they doing actually on the ground in China?
Two aspects, like there's like talking about like the big company and like the smaller company. So on an infrastructure level, I think global companies, they do realize that coming to China and like having a meaningful presence is not going to work. Like I think that, like global companies, they do realize, unless, they're building trains or airplanes, but even them, like they or like nuclear power plants, I think they just do realize that they can help, like bringing a know-how, like to China. But for the rest, like in terms of telecom and so on, I don't know if there is anything much to bring to the table. I mean, there will be obviously with the Alstom and those kind of company. But overall, like one interesting figure, coming back to more like consumers, is like globally, luxury has been minus 30% overall, like in 2020, and it's been plus 60% in China. And what we see is that COVID seems that, like it hasn't disappeared yet, and it seems that it's here to stay at least like in the next like 3 to 6 months. And I'm not here to do any prediction, but like those European companies, like or American companies, seeing those prediction and seeing that Chinese consumer are not going to come to Paris or New York in like for this Christmas, and they're not sure about next summer. Well, they're thinking, well, if we want still, like to get the money from the Chinese buyers, we need to have like proper systems set up in China. So this is where, and this not only applies to luxury companies, this applies in fashion, this applies to any kind of like consumer goods. So we see like a big move, and like global companies like pushing in a hurry those different elements, those different projects. to not rely only on what's happening in New York or Paris to target the Chinese users, but really to go on site here and invest on the Chinese market. So this is very interesting. This is a very interesting move, and this is like a very interesting turn of event.